I'm here with George Morgan, and we want to talk about a testimony that you've got, a very sensitive testimony. So, George, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, the topic today, it's really all comes down to identity, I suppose. For the longest time, I'm 38 years old now, and when I was very young, I unfortunately did suffer some abuse. Some of it was sexual, some of it was physical, and some of it was probably emotional, if I'm honest, as well. And obviously I was very young at the time, but, under the age of 10. So I didn't really understand any of what was really going on with me. I guess I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know what would happen. And what became apparent as I grew older, at this time in the culture, we didn't have all the words we do now, like LGBT. We didn't have the terms transgender. To be honest, I didn't even hear much about even the word gay. So I grew up. I guess there was some level of awareness that there were some people out there who live life differently. But as a Christian, I was raised Christian, and I made a decision for myself when I was young. I was told very little about it. All I was told is that this was wrong and that this was not for me, and I mustn't engage with it. And it didn't occur to me that this was something I was struggling with. I just went through life as a tomboy, really, thinking, I'm just a bit different. And as I got older, I became a young person. Obviously, feelings started to develop. And I very quickly discovered that I was identifying as a guy, even though I'm a biological female. And again, the funny thing is I just ignored it and carried on as normally as possible. But then as the culture started to shift, the secular culture, and it started to give me more information, I started to read this information and think, hang on, that's me. And it took me a long time to sort through it. But then I came to a place, I'm not sure exactly when it happened, but it was sometime before 2000. I realised that I was, in my mind, I was a guy in a woman's body. So that's the history of it. And obviously that is a bit problematic, being in a Pentecostal church with Christian parents, Christian brothers. I didn't have any sisters either, so it was very easy for me to slot into this sort of masculine role.
So did that mean that you were having lesbian affairs with other women?
I did, yes. Some of them were physical, many of them were not. Like with a lot of young guys, that everyone says they're sleeping around. Most of it's talk, to be fair, which is probably a good thing. But some of it isn't talk, and some of it certainly wasn't talk with me. And I did get into that world, yes. Probably not as deeply as some people, but I was certainly in that world and in that realm and circling around. And I was around other people like me, and also a lot of gay guys. I was around a lot of gay guys, and also people who are into alternative lifestyles, sort of Soho lifestyles, things like that.
Do you build yourself around people who are the same? And I guess if you do, that must be very hard to get out of, because once you get out of that and you say, no, I don't want this lifestyle, you're going to lose all your friends, aren't you?
That's exactly what happens. Because I was wrestling with it. We've heard that word this week at Faith Camp. A lot about wrestling with God, and I was wrestling because I called myself a Christian, and I was wrestling. And one minute I'd be preaching the word of God and bringing young people to Faith Camp, doing other things like that. And then on the other hand, I'd be going home, and I'd be viewing certain materials, I'd be connecting with certain individuals. And part of me knew it was wrong, I think, deep down. For me, I felt that something in me wasn't satisfied. That something in me felt this wasn't for me. But I did it because it aligned with my feelings. And so I had feelings versus, I guess, something in my heart that was saying, is this what you want for the rest of your life? And also there was a physical side of it as well. In my family, there are issues with barrenness of one kind or another, endometriosis, that kind of thing kicking around. So what happened was I was also physically either completely unable to have children, or certainly it was very unlikely. The doctors were never 100% sure, but they basically said, you're going to have real issue here. And I had a lot of very painful monthly occurrences, shall we say, without getting into the gory details. So I wasn't healthy physically in my body as well. And that helped to align me with these groups who would affirm that. And they would say, well, that's because you're not meant to be like that, are you? You're clearly meant to be with us, come along with us. And I felt very accepted, and I was actually very successful. So I did well in those circles. I was well liked,
If, as a Christian, if you could have taken a pill that said you were no longer gay, lesbian anymore, would you have taken it?
At some points I would have. At other points, if I'm honest, I don't think I would, because I was getting quite popular. I felt satisfied. As I said, I was involved with sort of the so-called culture. Some people call it BDSM, DS, stuff like that. That was on top of the whole transgender or gay thing. And I was enjoying myself, if I'm honest. So if you asked me one day, yes, another day, no, I would have sat with it.
So did you have to suppress your Christian faith in one sense to live the lifestyle that you were living?
Well, the weird thing is that I was largely accepted for what I was, which was a bit of a sort of a chimera of some sort, I suppose. I can't remember being seriously judged for the Christian thing, which I guess that's kind of a positive thing now that I think about it. Most of the time, because I was such a hot soup mixture, when I would start, believe it or not, actually attempting to share and minister to people, I was largely listened to. And there might be something in that somewhere, I don't know what it would be, but I was accepted. And I remember sharing the word with a lot of people, and particularly there was a number of witches that I shared it with and Wiccans online, and they were by and large quite friendly. The most severe case I can remember was a guy who was into real life bestiality. Obviously that's an extremely controversial topic, and I was able to share a little with him. He was probably the toughest one of the lot, because that's quite a long way down the path of having struggles, obviously.
So you were a Christian, witnessing, but struggling with an issue in your heart that you felt deep down you knew was wrong?
I knew that God didn't want that for my best. I could see already problems, like the whole, I wasn't going to be making any children this way, for a start. Now, for some people, they might think, well, that's not an issue. But something in me said, you know what, there's more to you than this. I wanted to get married and I wanted to have children in part of me, but a lot of me was in rebellion basically and was saying, but I'm enjoying myself here. I'm having too much fun. And I've heard a lot of young single men say the exact same thing. They've said, while I'm young, I'm going to go out there and enjoy myself every other night with a different lady in their case. I didn't see much difference between us. The only difference was who we were targeting.
And how did you get out of this lifestyle?
Well, I live in the southwest, and there was a conference in a city called Bristol, quite a big city, and Colin Urquhart, Pastor Colin Urquhart as he was then, he was coming down to the Holy Spirit conference. It was in the year 2000, so it's a very popular time in the church. There were many big celebrations being put on in the millennium, and I went along to this, definitely a Christian at the time. You know, I'd been coming to faith camp for years and years and years with my parents, and I came along and I got into the worship, and we got to the part of words of knowledge, and Pastor Colin started sharing a lot of words of knowledge, and I immediately felt really heavy and engaged with this process. So I was also rooted to the spot. It was like I was glued where I was standing. And he started ministering, and he started talking about healing, physical healing in the feminine parts of a woman, which was me, the womb. And I felt something happening. Now, I'm not a doctor, and I can't say what exactly happened. All I know is I felt something real in my body. And so I started receiving, because I've been taught you receive from God when he moves. And thank goodness someone told me that, by the way. That was at Faith Camp as well. Praise God for that. So I started opening up my heart and receiving, and I started receiving physical healing. And then he went on and gave another word about more like the internal heart of a woman, and he was talking about, you know, being feminine. Now, even now, I don't really, if I'm honest, describe myself as a feminine woman. I'm not handbags, I'm not shiny nails, I don't do that kind of stuff, you know, I don't lunch and all that kind of thing. I'm still more of a football kind of girl. But God was doing a work inside of me, and again, I had to accept that word was for me, and I did, because I believe Pastor Colin was sent from God, and I started hearing that word and receiving it. And I don't know how long it took, maybe a couple of minutes in that building. I came out and I remember standing on the corner of a road in Bristol. I remember just being in a puddle. I don't know why I remember that. Standing in a puddle and just jumping and kind of punching the sky and saying, I believe, God, you've made me a woman today. And that, for me, that was profound. Everyone else probably just thought I was being silly, but that was massive.
So would you say today that you've been healed from lesbianism?
I identify more closely nowadays with the transgender side of LGBT. I went for years thinking I was more of a lesbian, but then I realised actually I wasn't a girl who liked girls. I felt like I was a guy who liked girls, and you see the subtle difference there in a woman's body, obviously. So I would say that the healing started in 2000, probably took a couple of years, if I'm honest, to work right through it, because it's a massive identity transition, and back then there wasn't what there is now in the culture. There's not the sort of support for people who want to move through identity, whichever direction you're going in. So it took a few years, but I mean, where I stand today, I got married in 2001 to a man, happily, and we're still married. We've been married 16 years now, and we have 2 children, which is also pretty much a physical miracle. So the doctors are just sort of, well done. We're not sure exactly how you did that, but well done you. One's a boy, one's a girl, 6 and 3, and I couldn't be more thankful to the Lord.
So you're married, but is it still a struggle? Do you still have an attraction to other girls?
On bad days, I bet loads of people say this with their various sins they stumble with. There are days where the devil comes to me and he says that exact thing. He says, you're like, you remember when people have to go into the Catholic Church to be celibate, and we see how well that's worked out for them. You know, all these straight men trying to be celibate, and it's not great, and the results have been terrible. So the devil often comes to me and he says, that's you, you're not healed. You're working this out for the Lord, aren't you? So then on my weekdays where I'm maybe not feeling very Christian, he can come to me and poke me and say, take what you want. Go on, take what you want. You know deep down you're a bloke. Why don't you go and look at some girls? Why don't you indulge in a bit of thought about girls? And it is tempting, if I'm honest, but just like an alcoholic has to say, I'm not going to walk into that pub because I know what's in there is not going to help me in my walk with God, and it's not the direction God's chosen for me. I have the choice to say no or yes, and I've been saying no for a very long time. The devil's not happy with that.
Now, this must be very, very difficult for the church because, in one sense, a lot of part of the church, some people say, yes, homosexuality is fine, just go with it. Some parts of the church say, no, this is definitely wrong, it's definitely a sin. How have people responded to you in ministry? Have people been positive, been negative? Do you get both sides?
I do get a bit of a fun mixture. It's a bit of a garden, really. I mean, people who know me well, in general, quite positive. Occasionally, I do get asked how I'm doing. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. If you're in leadership, I totally understand. You've got to look after the flock that you've been given. I don't take offence. Although what I would say to those people is, meet me more socially, get to know me more, and then you won't need to feel quite so concerned because you'll see the real me. And if you see the real me, trust me, if I was slipping, you'd see it. So it should be less like a doctor's surgery, I think, if you're going to minister to people who are ex-LGBT. Don't make them feel as though they're being checked up on. It's not a parole hearing. It shouldn't feel like that, you know. And sometimes it can. And I think, again, that gives the enemy license to say, the church doesn't really love you, you know. And that voice can get strength from ministers who strengthen that voice. So I'd say to any ministers out there, have a think about that. Meet people as a friend, not as their sort of parole officer, because you don't need to feel like that when you're coming out of the LGBT, because it's a strong identity and it will welcome you back with our open arms the moment the church seems to have a judgmental heart against you. So we need to be mindful of that, I think, in the community of God.
Is being gay a choice?
For me, it was early childhood trauma that definitely steered me down that path. I'm not a doctor, and I always say I can't say for sure that there aren't predispositions in your genes. As far as I understand, we haven't found any, but what we have found is changes in things like brain size in gay men and straight men. A lot of people believe that happens after because of behaviour, and other people say, no, it happened before, and therefore you've got no choice. I say, to be honest, I almost don't think it matters, because I'll tell you, if a person is going in that lifestyle and they want to be there, they'll be there. If they feel that they need to come out and that they want to get with God and follow him, they'll do that. If they come down the middle, I would just say to any Christian, please go and walk with them, do life with them, see what happens. You know, if God wants to call a gay person or a transgender person into a straight lifestyle, he is more than powerful enough to do it. He is a star-breathing God. He put, stars like Canis Majoris into the sky. He isn't going to have a problem with somebody's feelings. So I would say trust him to the absolute nth degree, and walk with these people. Because if you don't love people, no matter what their sin, it could be a kleptomaniac, it could be an alcoholic, it could be an adulterous man or woman. It could be a harlot, basically. What would you do with them? Well, you wouldn't cast them out of the church. I hope not. And I would say the same for somebody who's in the LGBT lifestyle. You need to love people because we're all the same. We just sin differently.
So being gay may or may not be a choice, but actually living a sexual life is obviously always a choice, isn't it? We choose to have sex.
We do. Every time we engage in a sexual experience, we've made a choice, obviously assuming that you're conscious and you're aware of it. If you are conscious and aware and you've made a consensual choice, in the same way it is for a man to sleep with another man's wife, if you are a man with a man or a woman with a woman, you're making a choice. And that's your decision. And some would say that's fine. And others would say, hang on, let's think a bit more about this. Maybe if we're walking with God and keeping our eyes on him, we wouldn't put our eyes on our own desires. And it's exactly the same with alcohol or drugs in a way. You know, you can choose to take those things, or you can choose to say, I'd like to move away from it. It's tough. It's not easy, but I would like people to know there is another way if they want to do it. And you shouldn't be ridiculed, whichever side of the fence you're on. You need love. Everybody needs love, don't they? No matter who they are.
In some ways, we should admire gay, lesbians and Christians, shouldn't we? Because the Bible talks about if you burn with lust, then you should marry. And as a straight person, they can go out and hopefully in the future they know they will get married. But if you're gay and you have feelings and you know you can't marry the opposite sex, then you've got to be celibate, haven't you? And that must be very, very hard and difficult indeed. And that's where we've got to admire people who've made a choice to sacrifice their sexuality to God.
It is a massive decision. It is so hard because most of the church, and I say this with the greatest, deepest respect, that I have found really struggle to accept you. Even the ones who know, they've heard the message of love, they know they need to love. Sometimes it does come out the lips, but I found that then in the life, again, you almost feel like you've got a tag on your ankle. I'm just saying how it feels for me. This is testimony for me, really. I'm not saying everyone does it, but that's what I've experienced. So I would say, again, to Christians out there, just have a think about that. Imagine if you felt that you had an ankle tag on. Imagine if you felt that you were meeting with a leader. It was like a parole officer. Just imagine how that would make you feel. And over time, would that not be, grounds for the enemy to really stir that heart and say, oh, they don't really love you, do they? Give that some thought. And I think if we all treated each other a little bit more like brothers and sisters who just sin differently, we might find our way forward on this a little bit more. And of course, there'll always be people who disagree. There's always going to be people hardline on one side or the other. Maybe if more of us come down the middle, I would say, we've got a better chance of loving each other on the way, haven't we?
So should the church show more love to gay, lesbian and the whole community?
I don't think we have a choice. Otherwise, I don't think we'll have much of a church in the generation to come. This is now a massive issue. Anyone who doesn't think it's a massive issue, just turn on your television set. Just go to any parade, any festival, anywhere. Just look around you in the air. You'll see the flags. Go and find out for yourself. Don't take my word for it. This is with us now. And as a church, I think we have to decide what we're going to do. And I know what Jesus did. He went around doing good and loving people. He sat down with harlots and tax collectors who were thieves, basically, weren't they? And he ate with them. He didn't agree with what they were maybe living in, but he made space for them. And then they willfully laid down their likes, their lusts, their wants. In the case of tax collectors, they paid back up to 4 times, I think. And he didn't command them to do a thing. They did it of their own volition. So I would say to the church, do what Jesus did, just like the bracelet says.
What's your prayer for the gay and lesbian community?
Please don't listen to those of us who haven't thought this through. I apologise on behalf of everyone who's just not got this and they've just said, you have no place, you are dirty, you are filthy. Jesus has not said that to you. People have, and we're flawed. So please don't judge Jesus by his followers. Always look at him, don't look at the followers. And to you, I would say, come and have a coffee with me. Come and have a cup of tea. Come and have a spritz. Let's sit down. Let's find out what we can do in our lives together and go from there, because I'm not going to start from the place of telling you there's something about you that's wrong. There's something about all of us that's wrong, and that's why we all need Jesus. So let's come from there, not focus on the negative, and see where we go. And if in a couple of years' time down the road, I'm going to your wedding, wouldn't that be wonderful? But I won't assume that. Let's just be friends and see where we go.
So you're happy to chat with people who are maybe struggling with this. What is your Twitter page for people who'd like to know more?
Anyone can hook up with me at all. It's at MSKIMKAZE. So that's at Ms. Kim Kays. And I'm very happy to talk with anyone on there. It's only 140 characters though, so if you want to, from there, we can get in touch in a better way.
Okay, George, well, thank you very much for sharing.
You're very welcome. God bless.